right, all right. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. I so appreciate this. I so appreciate this. As I said, we're always glad to have the opportunity to chime in to WVOE and also to the live stream through Facebook and YouTube. And so chatting with everybody down in Chadburn as well as the rest of the world. So hopefully we got a lot of people listening here. So as always, we want to wish a good afternoon to listeners. Yeah, you're locked into WVOE, the voice of Ebony, where your health is our heartbeat. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Brown, president and founder of PressureMDAcademy, welcoming you to another enriching session of Health Facts, the show where wisdom meets wellness and knowledge is always in season because that's what we do here. Okay. So today we're going to talk about uh, a topic that I know we've talked about it before, and honestly, we've seen a lot. You hear about it a lot, but I'm at a point now. Sometimes you got to repeat the same issue over and over again, and this is one of those issues that I do think you have to repeat over and over again. And for those of you that are online, you probably saw we actually played uh, an Instagram video through two gentlemen that were talking about, you know, um, they were basically talking about black men and approach how they approach healthcare and kind of this attitude that black men typically have towards healthcare. And it covers not only the issues that we face, but also kind of really two ways of how people approach it, right? So, one was Kevin, and then the other was an influencer called Tony. I guess they're comedians, right? Tony. And they were talking about the fact that Kevin kind of posted that he went to the doctor and encouraged other black men to go to the doctor. And then there were a lot of interesting comments in response to this. And, I feel like Kevin's response was very, kind of what a lot of people do, which is kind of like, hey, you need to get this done, the whole 9 yards. And Tony was a little more aggressive, in terms of addressing the issues that that we face head on, kind of really attack, I won't say attacking, but really, I think it's out of concern, uh, but to, assertively and straightforward illustrate the issues that happen when you do not when you don't pursue, kind of what we call routine healthcare, really. I mean, because this is, Kev was talking about just going to get a physical. I mean, it's not surgery, it's not, any invasive procedure or anything, just going to get a regular physical. And the responses were really, not surprising me because I hear it a lot, but I think for a lot of people, they'll see, things that maybe their loved ones kind of express, which is, I work out every day, and one of the big things is I feel fine, and because this is a big one. A lot of African American, a lot of men in general, but definitely African Americans, because that's what that's what we're going to talk about today. Express this sensation that I feel fine, and they use that as a measuring stick of how well they are, and kind of almost without understanding the fact that kind of like we said before. I think we did a silent killer episode the earlier this year, that a lot of the conditions that that uh, that we die from or get disabled from, you can't feel it. These are not things you can feel. And to if you just use I feel fine as a measuring stick, there's a lot of stuff, hypertension, diabetes, cancers, that you won't feel until by the time you feel it, it's too late. And this is like I said, this is an ongoing issue that comes over and over again. So we're going to talk a little bit about today about this, but also kind of bring it in from a perspective of some of the rationale behind this, because it yes, yes, we don't go to the doctor like you should, but there are reasons for this. I mean, there are reasons for this. So, and I think if we address it from that, from our that reason standpoint, it'll help understand and help us all to understand. So, for some people, for some men that are seeing this, I mean, it may help that man to understand what's going on and get a little perspective onto it. Okay, so as always, we'd like to start out with a few statistics in there just to kind of give people a little, at least a few numbers. I mean, these are not, these are kind of estimates, of course, and but just to let you know, and so number one, only about 65 to 70% of adult men, and this is all men in the U.S. report having a regular primary care clinician, compared to over 80% of women. So like, and I think most of us know this. Men go a lot less than women, and when we drill down a little bit, African American men are the least likely group to have a consistent source of health care outside of emergency settings. And honestly, emergency settings is not, the emergency room is not a primary care doctor. Okay. The emergency room is not your primary care doctor. So I want to make sure people know this. But African American men are the least likely to have a consistent source of health care. And just think about this, we've mentioned this on the show. And I think a lot of people, at least intuitively, know having a consistent, doctor or a consistent, even the consistent clinic that you go to is huge. I mean, like I said, that person, that clinic, has your records and get to know you and things of this nature, so that you can go there for kind of some of your routine issues and not have to go to the emergency room or urgent care and trying to use them as your source of emergency care. Okay. Nearly 1 in 3 men say they avoid going to the doctor unless they're seriously ill. This kind of goes back to that whole issue of I feel fine. We don't go until we feel, we can't do anything else, or it's interfering with what we're doing for work, what we're playing, the sports we're playing, or something of that nature. So, that's 1 in 3. So if you and two buddies are sitting there, one of y'all has something seriously going on and refuses to go because you quote unquote feel fine, right? Men are significantly less likely to complete preventative screenings, and I think of course, these are things such as your blood pressure checks, cholesterol screenings, colon cancer screenings, mental health evaluations, which a lot of people need. So and so men are significantly less likely to complete these screenings, and this kind of goes back to some of the comments on what um, uh, some of the comments in response to Kevin going for his checkup, and that is that the colon cancer screening, which this is a colon cancer screening is huge. Colon cancer screening is one of the few screenings where you can find, if you find that cancer or that precancerous polyp early enough, you cure yourself of the colon cancer. You can cure yourself and prevent this completely and totally. So this is one and yes, it requires endoscopy, and yes, you got to go. It goes to the anus, into the colon, but it is a necessary test, right? So we got that. So then we go back to the African American men are more likely to be diagnosed later in the course of diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease, and prostate cancer. Yet again, we go back to this whole issue of preventative checks, and going to, not just going to get care, but following up on your care. So it's one thing to go in and, you go to the urgent care for, a stub toe, they get that fixed, but they tell you, hey, your blood pressure is elevated, go get it checked out. But if you don't go get it checked out, like I said, 5, 10 years later, like I said, now you're in a stroke. It's just very disheartening to see, a young man in his 20s with a stroke from hypertension, or a 40-some-year-old guy, 40, some guy in his 40s that's blind from diabetes. Okay. These are issues that are easily prevented, or at least, you know, you could delay your stroke, you can delay your blindness, delay your dialysis if you get these conditions diagnosed early and treated effectively. So that's some of the effects of doing this. Men die on average 5 to 6 years earlier than women, and much of that gap is tied to preventable or manageable conditions. Yet again, you're delaying, you're skipping preventive care, you're delaying, you're pushing things off, and it you pay for it with your life. Okay. All right. And African American men have the highest premature mortality rate of any demographic group in the US, i.e., African American men die the earliest of stuff that they can prevent. That's what that means. That's what premature mortality. Premature mortality is you dying before you're supposed to, and it's because of something you can prevent. That's what it means. Okay. Now, I put these numbers out there, and it's. I think it's easy to just say, hey, guys don't care about their health, black men don't care about their health, but really, if you really look at it, that's not the truth. That's not the whole story. Okay, these numbers don't mean that men don't care about their health. They care about their health. They really do. They care about their health. They care about themselves. They care about their family, the kids, stuff of nature. But there are things that are getting in the way of men getting the care that they need to live a really successful, a more successful and a longer life. There are things that are getting in the way. There are things that we're going to cover over here, right? So one of them, fear, masculinity, and silence, right? So the American concept of masculinity, even from a young age, men are taught to not complain, never show weakness, don't ask for help. Okay, you're supposed to do it alone. You internalize this, handle it yourself. Pain is being part of them. Pain is being part of a man. Be a man, you take pain. And doctors are for when something is really, really wrong. That's not for yeah. You're not just going over there for no stub toe. Yeah, wrap it up with some duct tape. Keep going, right? And so for men, especially black men, going to the doctor is like you're surrendering, right? I'm admitting defeat. And so that's the internal messaging that goes on in there. And 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 that's kind of what's just kind of what we do, right? That's what we do. Because, for some men, avoiding the doctor is a safer space, a space that you feel like you control more than hearing bad news. So it's like I'd rather sit here and suffer than to go in and somebody tell me I got cancer, I got heart issue, I got whatever that is, right? So for some men, that silence is that safe space. I still got some level of control as long as I can stand up, right? So that's where some of that stuff comes from, right? So that is, and it's very unhelpful because that projected American concept of masculinity is this kind of single, handle it yourself sort of thing. But the reality is, and I actually have a book and I wrote it down there. I'll share this link for it. But the reality is, when you think about masculinity, so yes, the projected image of masculinity is this solo, super tough guy. But if you think about it, and what do you think about when you think about masculinity? What do you think about kings? You think about soldiers. You think about athletes. Like said, the toughest guys, toughest men ever, right? It's because that concept is also there. Every single one of them have doctors. A king has a royal physician. A soldier. I mean, like I said, you can't even get into the military without a thorough exam. And then athletes, the same thing. They get regular evaluation. They get evaluations on a regular basis. So it's kind of this weird little duality where this you internalize this independent handle everything yourself, but you honor, worship, idealize these individuals or groups of individuals or these types of individuals that who whose lived experience is totally different than what you're doing to yourself, right? So they're getting checked out, but you're not, right? So that part also goes on there, and it plays a role, right? Now we have all that, and I say all that, and then for black men and black people, black people in general, and of course black men, you know, there is historical trauma and there is mistrust of healthcare, especially in America. I mean, probably everywhere else, but we just going to talk about America and American Black folk, right? There are historical reasons for this. There's a historical backlog of this. Some of it specifically for the men, and some of it, kind of a black, like I said, because a lot of people like to separate between the black men, the black women. Oh, this happened to black men, it didn't happen to the black women, or this happened to black women, it didn't happen to black men. But at the end of the day, the reason why a lot of these atrocities are happening is because you're black. Period. Okay, it's like whether you're black man, black woman, whatever. You're black, you're getting treated differently. You're getting treated, you're getting treated in a wrong manner. So you kind of just stop it from there. And then not only that, remember, even a lot of these historical traumas that happen, whether they happen directly to the family, or maybe someone that you know, or even just kind of reading it or hearing about it. We have a very strong oral tradition. So if your grandma, your aunties and uncles are discussing this at the table, you internalize this even at an early age. So a lot of these atrocities, even though they don't happen to you directly, or maybe they happen to the women and not the men, it still breeds mistrust in the system. And so some of the things, some of the things we know, some things we may not know, but like, you're talking about, of course, everybody knows, I think everybody has heard about the Tuskegee syphilis study, where treatment was intentionally withheld. So think about this. I mean, we're right here talking about how men need to go to the doctor. Okay. Um, with this Tuskegee syphilis study, they did go to the doctor. They did go to trusted healthcare folks. They did the things they were supposed to do. And part of this, from what I read, I got to confirm this though, is because Booker T. Washington had a program where he was trying to get people more engaged, to live a slightly healthier life. And so the Tuskegee study kind of came on top of this. So like these people, trusted the healthcare system. They trusted, the nurse, the doctors that were treating them, and they had this condition, and the medical community intentionally withheld the treatment and let these people go through the stuff. So like, so imagine if you were in this area, maybe your great grandparents or something that you had that, that storyline is going to come through here. You're not going to automatically trust, going to the doctor. Okay, my great granddaddy went there and y'all did, you didn't treat him right. So that stuff is there. And then of course everybody else is looking at this the same way. So that story spreads around. So this is not trivial. Okay, so you got the syphilis. There's medical experimentation that used to be performed on enslaved black men without consent. Of course, you're a slave. They back then they just assumed you couldn't, hey, just sit there and do whatever I say, right? You got that. You got remember when we were segregated, the hospitals were segregated, and so you were not allowed to be treated in the main hospital. You had to go to the black hospital, and they didn't have and the black hospital didn't have the same resources. There's you use of black bodies for research without permission. There's the persistent undertreatment of pain in black patients, and this is some documented stuff. Ongoing disparities in diagnoses, referrals, treatment recommendations. So all these things kind of play in, when it play into why, or some of the rationale behind why black men don't go and seek healthcare, or don't have a trust of healthcare. Okay, and there's also what forced sterilization, reproductive abuses. I mean, I think in that, like yet again, we're talking about men, but like I said, what happens to the women also leads to distrust in the men. And so at one point in time, they used to have something, I think it was Fannie Lou Hamer coined the term Mississippi appendectomy. And what a Mississippi appendectomy is that these black women were going in for, like I said, maybe a liver appendectomy, or some sort of abdominal procedure or surgery. And what the surgeon would do, is that they would actually take out the uterus. And what that is, that's where the baby's form, of some nature. They would do this without any consent whatsoever. And so, you're trying to have a baby and you can't, and come to find out, like I said, when you were younger and went in for this appendectomy, they just took out your reproductive parts without permission, without telling you or anything of this nature. And Fannie Lou Hamer was the one that kind of brought this issue to light. So these all go into the historical trauma and mistrust that really African Americans in general, but like I said, it kind of hones in on African American men and have for the healthcare system. Okay, the American healthcare system. They just at some point in time, you just don't trust it, right? So so while we and unfortunately, in the past, it really probably was protective. You couldn't just walk your bond. You couldn't just walk into a white hospital, right? Or if you had a white doctor, you just couldn't trust that person. So, but unfortunately, carrying that stuff forward, now you're dying from conditions that could be treated. So now we got to figure out how we can address this issue to get brothers to kind of go in, get the stuff checked, and we're gonna talk about this next on the next topic to give them what you need um, in order to navigate the healthcare system, if you will, to navigate American healthcare. So that's what we have to do in terms of next steps and stuff of the nature. Another thing that happens, and I think they mentioned it also. One of the commenters mentioned this as well, and that is herbal and alternative medicine. And this really is huge because I'm as a doctor, I get this question all the time about herbs and herbs and different sorts of alternate therapies and stuff of the nature. So one of the questions is, why do African American men prefer non-Western approaches? One of them is acknowledgement without judgment. Okay, so you get acknowledged and you don't get judged. A lot of the herbal and alternative medicine providers, really, really don't case this stuff in a judgment paradigm, right? They just acknowledge your stuff. I got a herb here. I got a massage thing here. Whatever that treatment modality is provided to you without any sort of judgment that can make someone feel, kind of less than, right? Okay. So, in addition to that, there are also other reasons. I mean, there's cultural tradition and ancestral knowledge. I mean, remember, you know, that yeah, at one point in time, there was no medicine, right? There was no doctor, there was no medicine. So people learned how to treat certain conditions with these actual herbs and stuff of that nature. So, and while Western medicine may have uh, improved on some of those tactics, remember penicillin is from a natural source, right? It's from a natural source. And Western medicine may have, kind of analyzed and, they got the molecules and they rearrange the molecules and can give it to you in a more precise manner. Before this, there were a lot of, we had to treat ourselves. We had to allow our bodies to heal itself. That stuff is real. That stuff is real. So, but now we have things that are a lot different. We can analyze things earlier. We can treat things a little different. Okay. So there's cultural tradition and ancestral knowledge. I remember one time, like I said, hey, look, we got, if you were sick, you went to certain people that were healers in the neighborhood, or your mom or your grandmama knew how to make a salve or something to put on your chest. So all that stuff is real. The other thing is mistrust of pharmaceutical motives. Why? Because the pharmaceutical company is a corporation. It does live for profit. So while there are a lot of good that comes out of pharmaceutical companies, sometimes there's a lot of mistrust. Are you really telling, which is, are you really telling us the real story? Are you hiding something? And so a lot of that mistrust that goes into the healthcare in general now gets transferred over to the pharmaceutical company, and therefore you don't want to take the pills that are coming from this pharmaceutical company, even though that's kind of analyzed and it is analyzed a lot more than what the herbal um, supplements may be analyzed. Okay. The other things that go on, cost and access barriers. Sometimes it's just, it's a little cheaper to get this. It's a little cheaper to get this herb, it's just tea or whatever it is, than it is to get the medications. Some of these co-pays are ridiculous, right? And that's if you got insurance. You got to pay for the insurance. You got a copay that's also, um, you know, uh, you know, extremely high. So that cost is an issue. Access is an issue. You got to make sure you got to have you got to have a doctor to write for it. So if you can't afford it, or if you can't don't have your a doctor, it can be really hard to get typical Western medicines, right? So it may be easier to get an herbalist that might be down the street. Okay. The other thing is feeling heard outside of traditional systems. Yet again, I kind of going back into, you know, the paradigm or the framework of the individual that may be providing you with the alternative medicine or the herbal medicine those people are going to be able to listen to you a little more. They can probably provide you examples that you're familiar with, whereas the traditional systems, and this is one of the things, where especially as you lose the primary docs, or you lose docs that own their own practices, and you go into systems, you know, you got people. I tell people all the time, like I said, primary care docs are allocated, 7 to 10 minutes per patient in order to keep the system afloat. And so it's hard to feel heard if your doc is in, touch, ask a few questions, check mark, here's a script, and then they're gone. It's hard to feel heard inside of that traditional system that's going on there, right? So like I said, an herbalist may be able to sit down here and provide you with something, listen to your story, and be easier to access, right? And then there's a fear of being pushed into medications. Okay, so that's a real fear. So if you don't want to take medications in the first place, and I go to the clinic, and that's the only thing you got is the medication, then I don't want to go to the doctor, and because the only thing they're going to do is give me some pills. And I will tell you this. I mean, like I said, honestly, that sensation is actually quite real. So I do a lot of, again, I do lifestyle medicine. So one of the things that I do, like I said, when people come in with hypertension, is I let them know, hey, look, there's a path here. If I can find where we the way lifestyle medicine practitioners do is that they tend to find what conditions you have, then identify which of those may be remedied by lifestyle medicine and give you a chance to do the lifestyle. Uh, and we never promise that you're not going to need medication, because, like I said, some conditions just require medication, traditional medications. But giving you that chance to change diet, to eat better, to exercise, to relieve stress. I've had people in my practice where their life is just stressful, and they're coming in with super high blood pressures. And, don't get me wrong, I got to give them at least a little bit of medication to get the stuff down, but they go get the stress out of their life, and then I get a chance to take the medication away. But a lot of this is kind of a newer angle for medicine now, and like it's something that hopefully it'll grow. But like this does go into the this does validate people's fear of being pushed into medications without trying something that's a little more natural, that feels a little more appropriate. Okay. So, one of the things that happens is that medicine, and because herbal medicine really is not the enemy. Okay. The real issue is that, when a man feels he has to make a choice between tradition and science. Okay, so there's sometimes you're made to feel like you have that choice, and no one explains to you that, hey, look, we can try this, or you try this ain't working, we need to go this way. And that tends to not be the case in a lot of people's clinical experience, right? Okay, so one of the things that I always like to let people know that the goal is not typically either or. The goal that we want to have we want people to experience is safe, informed, and coordinated care. So if you got herbal medications, let your doc know. Let your or doc know let the doc know that you're taking the herbal medication. Like I said, they may dismiss it, or they may say, hey, we'll watch this. But we want to make sure that we're coordinated as care, and that you're not feeling that you have to make a choice between one or the other. Okay, we want a whole person approach, right? So, so those are some of the reasons. And then the other thing that we want to talk about is like health literacy and communication. And one thing that people kind of don't always understand, and that is, we say health literacy or low health literacy, and people say, oh, that means you're unintelligent. And it's not. Health literacy is not intelligence. Health literacy is about how well informed and how well the information is explained, not necessarily not how smart someone is. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, if you got low literacy in the first place, it's going to make it hard to have health literacy. But in general, health literacy, remember, every like if you go to a banker, bankers got certain code, certain words that they use. Same thing with medicine. Medicine has certain words that we just use, and so it becomes easier for us to continue to use those words, right? And but it's up to us to translate that stuff into something that someone can understand because that's a whole new language and it's a whole new paradigm, right? So cool. So now, but don't misunderstand. Health literacy is lower health literacy is linked to worse outcomes, and whether that's because you don't understand stuff, don't know why, and therefore are less likely to take the medication or the treatments that you want. But that lower health literacy is linked to worse outcomes. Um, and like I said, and medical language a lot of times excludes instead of empowers. We tend to not really empower. Empowering Empowerment is not really part of the medical genre or the medical language. A lot of times, poor communication can fuel mistrust and avoidance because if I don't trust you, right? If I don't trust you, not I'm because you're either just dismissive of my experiences or just not listening to me properly, I'm not going to trust you and I'm going to avoid you. I'm gonna miss I'm going to miss appointments. I'm not going to take the medication you told me because I didn't have a chance to let you know or let the doc know how I feel about this, right? Okay. And unfortunately, African American men, like everything else, are disproportionately affected by health literacy issues than others. So when people don't understand, because when people don't understand the system feels dangerous. Okay. If I don't understand the system, I don't understand the system of a health clinic, health practice, it feels dangerous when I walk in there. I got to talk to this person at the front desk. I got to talk to a nurse. Why do I have to say the same thing over and over again and not understanding what's going on there? Okay. Why that doctors came in, they left, they didn't even ask me about the real reason I came in here. Right. So, if I don't understand how the system works, the system's going to feel dangerous. So these are some of the reasons why black men have the perspective and the responses that you see, like I said, typified in that and and the responses to Kevin, right? Now, what we're going to talk about next time, and it looks like we're almost out of time here, is some actionable solutions for men and healthcare systems. Okay, cool. So we're going to do these real quick. For men, we want you to make sure you start with one trusted clinicians. We want you to ask questions. We want you to write down your questions even before you come in. You got to write them down, put them on a pad, bring them in with you. Okay. Sometimes you may even bring someone with you, someone that you trust to appointments. Like I said, either sitting there with you, or like I said, maybe when the exam goes, they step outside. These are things you want to do, right? And then you want to focus on prevention, not perfection. Okay. We don't want to be perfect. We just want to prevent things from happening. So let's focus on those. All right. And then we'll talk a little bit next time also about something that some of the clinicians can do. They need to build relationships. They do need to use plain language and stuff of that nature. So that is part of what we want to do there, right? So yet again, I'm a doctor, but I'm not your doctor unless you sign up. Okay. So I'm a doctor, but not your doctor. For your particular medical issues, make sure that set up with a primary care doc, discuss this stuff with them, and take your medical issues to an actual medical person. Of course, if you're experiencing any emergencies, call 911 as well. But like I said, this kind of wraps up our show for today. We actually have a part two where we're talking about how you as a man can rebuild trust, how you can navigate the system, and how you can advocate for yourself. Like I said, so we're not just going to talk. We're just not going to just complain. We're going to talk. We're going to provide you with some tools that you need in order to, uh, uh, in order to, uh, in order to create the best and healthiest version of yourself, right? But I will leave on this. If you're listening today and you have not seen a doctor within the last year, this is your sign. Not because you're weak, but because you're worth it. I want you to call a primary care doctor. Go find your primary care doctor. Call them today. Okay. So this is wrapping up health facts. I'm Dr. Christopher Brown. And I want to thank everybody that's on the radio that's listening, everybody that's on the live stream that's listening. If you're watching the recording, I want to thank you as well. Feel free to like and follow. Call the radio station if you have questions. Feel free to type in some questions if you have any questions, suggestions, or just let us know what you think about this show. All right, thank you very much, and we're going to turn it back over to WVOE.